have some good discussions today. My name is Keri. I'm an assistant professor of biology at Feng College.
And my name is Chloé Vettier. I'm an assistant professor of French at Scripps.
And we're hosting this workshop as part of our role as CTL AI Fellows. We're a working group. There's actually some of our panelists that are part of the group as well. And we're hoping to provide resources to the 7 Cs that will help us better integrate AI, generative AI specifically, into our teaching. So the main goals that we're hoping to get through today, as you see in front of you, I passed out a little handout. So we're going to start by doing a bit of reflection, thinking about the ways that we've incorporated AI into teaching, and then discuss that with our neighbors, have a group discussion, and then move into our panels. Each panelist will give a brief talk. We'll have time for just a couple questions following each talk. And then once all panelists have gone and given their presentations, then we'll do a more formal presentation style where you can ask questions of all panelists. That will take up the bulk of the time. As time allows, we're hoping to do a little bit of a reflection at the end, trying to congeal some ideas that you learned today into actionables that you can take into your classes for the spring and beyond. Okay, so with that, we'll give you a couple minutes to just individually introduce questions. I know some of you got a head start. Well done. I'll check in about 2 minutes, see if we need more time. After that, we can discuss in pairs.
Or just,
Having such great conversations.
What else do you have a policy or a language?
All right, so can I see it as a show of hands? Who has an AI policy?
It's everywhere.
Yeah, it has.
Who has an AI policy?
Oh.
Oh, not very many. So hopefully, if nothing else, we can leave maybe with a little more of a cogent idea of what we can put in our syllabi. All right, that was interesting to learn. So I'd like to know what some groups talked about. We have just a little bit of time to take some comments, but if anyone's interested in sharing with the group what they answered for the second question, using generative AI in the classroom, what worked well, what didn't, I'd love to hear your responses.
Well, I didn't have a formal policy, but I said if they wanted to use AI, that was fine with me, because I didn't really know that much about it. But they had to tell me about it. So they just had to indicate for this paper or whatever, they were short papers. But nobody did. And so they were either lying to me, some, and they were using it, or they just didn't find that it worked. But I'm kind of curious about other people. Whether the honor system works or not.
I had a very similar policy for, I do biology, so we do full lab reports, and I had a very similar policy for mine. And I did have one student who said that he used generative AI, so I followed up and I was like, oh, how did you feel using it? And basically it was like, it kind of helped organize ideas a little bit better. He used ChatGPT, but he didn't find it that useful because it tends to make connections that don't exist. And then you have to go back through and vet it, and that becomes really hard for a novice in the field. Yeah. Anyone else for either the second or the third, using AI in your courses, how did it go? Or if you're not using AI, what your rationale might be.
Can we go back to one? I'd like to know what people put in their policy.
We can, yeah, sure. Absolutely.
I mean, because they're not institutional policies near as I can tell. So what drives that characteristics you put in the policy?
Yeah, I'll open up the floor.
Don't all speak at once.
Yeah, what's your name?
Angela.
Angela.
So I adapted my AI policy from Colombian professor from Colombia, and so I quoted that. I said, like, this is adapted. I said that they are welcome to use artificial intelligence tools, but they have 5 key guidelines: be informed to understand how AI works, be transparent, like clearly state which tool you use, for example, Grammarly to proofread or ChatGPT to clarify like certain concepts, so they have to tell me. Be ethical, do not present system-generated like text as your own. That's what I told them, you need to write, but you could proofread. And then I said, be responsible, cross-verify any information you get from the AI with other like trustworthy sources.
Thank you. Anyone else who has an AI policy? I think.
I was trying to present that later on. So I just want to say, I have like 2 categories for using AI in my syllabus used last semester. So basically, I divided that into 2 categories. One is exploring ideas, which is acceptable. The language like this, AI can be a valuable tool for exploring general ideas, concepts, and gathering information. This use is often considered ethical and productive, but you must engage with AI-generated content critically. Validate the information independently, and use it to enhance your understanding rather than as a replacement for their own efforts. Cheating, another category, I said, using AI to directly provide answers to specific questions or assignments without understanding the material is generally considered unethical, and it can be seen as cheating because this behavior does not promote learning and understanding. So the fine line is whether in my class, because I'm teaching a language class, so when I see a very well-written essay, so in class I will just ask a student to reproduce information in class. If you can reproduce that information, I will consider that as learning. If we cannot reproduce the information, I will consider that as cheating. It's very simple language.
I like that last one too. If you've learned from the activity, that's different than copying. Right, so I do want to have more time for discussion, but unfortunately we don't. And I know that we have some presenters that have some really great material that they want to share with us. So if everyone's okay, I'd like to move into the, okay, perfect. Presenters.
To click it, like, do I have to walk back or do it? I mean, we could put the computer here. Oh, you're okay, yay.
Always.
I didn't answer your question because I'm going to answer it right now. So.
I was getting the feeling that they were jumping ahead.
I'm Mellissa Martinez, and I work at Claremont McKenna. Thank you. So I basically have 2 roles. I'm a visiting assistant professor of literature, and I'm the associate director of multilingual writing, which means I work at the Center for Writing and Public Discourse. Oh, do I do this? Oh. Basically, I work with multilingual writers who are either first-gen or international students, helping them learn how to write. So I do a lot of sentence level, one-on-one, sort of like concierge style. They'll come and go over a paper 1 to 10 times, as many times as they need. And so the idea is you learn through revision with me. And I've been doing that 10 years, and I've had a lot of success with students who went on to write a book. And, sort of, if students want to, they can meet with me as much as they like. And then when I teach freshman writing seminar, it's kind of the same thing. I consider myself with these 2 roles. I really think of my role on campus as teaching writing. No? Okay, sorry. Since I think of myself as a writing teacher, and I feel like it's so important that students leave college with the ability to logically format their prose, to go through the work of learning how to be a writer. It kind of puts me in 2 different camps, because I'm fascinated by AI. I use ChatGPT in my own life for certain things, but I'm strongly, when it comes to writing, I'm strongly in the no camp. And the reason is because, again, I want students to learn how to write. And I think that, it depends on the discipline. I hear people that, I've heard people that, say, oh, I let my students say to ChatGPT, pretend that you're a tutor and you're teaching me these concepts of econ. I totally get that. I think each discipline has, different ways in which they can use AI. For me, my teaching goal is that they put the time in and the effort in to learn how to write. So my policy is written very clearly. I tell the students they may not use AI for any of the writing process, whether that's proofreading, editing, revising, rewriting. So it's hard to uphold. I mean, the way as I uphold it is I'm very clear on the syllabus and I bring it up over and over. Also, I talk about my own, I'll say, oh, this is a chart I had 2 years ago, and look, I ran it through, and this is what it did. What do you guys think? I compare, what AI did for me. And also, I know this is kind of funny, but persuasion, I tell my students, like the first day, I say, you know, you're spending $70,000 a year to come here. And I always say, like, learning how to write is a transformative experience. So before puberty, you didn't know what you were going to be like at age 21, right? You couldn't know. And so you don't know what you'll be like once you really learn how to write. So that works for some of them. You know, some people are just going to use it. And I've also used the detection sites. I've run their papers through through GPT-0 and others. And I'm not going to talk so much about that today, but I'm happy to tell you my experience with that, because I was getting a bunch of like, likelihood 40% was written by AI, and I'm like, oh my God. But what I did is I called my students in for one-on-one meetings, and I kind of got a sense. The students who it was 80% or higher, they were like, yeah, I used it. And then the students that were like 40%, I swear I didn't use it. So what I did is I ran papers from 2 years ago, pre-ChatGPT, and they also got 40%. So, you know, you can't just look at GPT-0 and be like, hey, it's 40%. It's not really trustworthy in that way. But I would say anything from my experience, 80 to 90% is trustworthy. So anyways, that's my no category. But why do I want to use it? I mean, I want the student, I had an op-ed written by a student once, and he's like, why are we at college and teachers aren't teaching us how to use this tool? Like, we are at like this, you know, we should be learning how to use AI. And I talked about it with him later. I said, do you think maybe your teachers don't know yet? You know, like, we're figuring it. And he was like, oh, it hadn't even occurred to me. And I said, it's new to us too, you know? But I think it's important that, you know, we incorporate it in some ways. At least for me, I want to, you know, connect and remain relevant. I don't want my students to be like, oh yeah, that dinosaur, you know, she's just like, yeah, you have to learn how to write. My son's a CS major, and he's like, Mom, we're not going to have to learn how to write, you know, later. And I'm like, don't say that, like I'm obsolete, you know, don't say that. So I want to use it, and this is what I'm going to focus on today is basically an activity that I did in my class that worked really well. So if you've seen this, if you're CMC and you've seen this, I apologize, it's a repeat of something I presented. But I found a great way to use it was as an image generator, and so we had this big discussion about it, and so I'll show you what we did in my class. I'm considering letting students use it for idea, like brainstorming. That's a little controversial because I've had other lit professors that are like, well, don't you want them to make those connections by themselves? But sometimes, you know, I'll even be like, what's the significance of, you know, and then AI will come up with all these great things, and I'm like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So I'm kind of considering letting them use it for that. I'd be open to what you guys think about that. They do use it as a search engine. They already do. It's like, you know, I would never tell my student not to use Google, you know, so I tell them they must cite it. And then we use it in classroom discussion. So these are all the ways that I'm trying to integrate it into my classroom. So what I did, so I teach this course called The American Dream. It's a freshman writing seminar. And I had this goal. I thought, what should I do? So I wanted to incorporate AI into the learning process, but totally prohibit its use for writing, any form of writing, right? So their first paper was to define the American dream. And then I had them for homework write in Sakai like sort of a 3-sentence definition, their personal definition of the American dream. So then they all come to class. I had this idea. I'm like, I heard something on NPR about like image generators, and I'm like, I'll use that. And so I came in, I told them to bring their computers, and I said, you know, come up with an image generator, and they all kind of worked together. They came up with Canva and PixArt, but there are many. And I said, okay, tell your AI, you know, tell your friend AI to create an image that represents the American dream, first one, okay, with no other information. So it represents the American dream. And they all got images very similar to that. In fact, if you'll go to the next slide, I'll show you all the first images. Okay, so this is without any, so they were all laughing. I mean, this first part took quite a bit because they were sharing and they're like, oh my God, look at that car. So, I mean, as you can see, it's predominantly houses, mostly white people. There are a couple of people of color, older people, and the houses thing, you know, statues, but as you can see, they're all quite similar, right? And then, could you go back? Sorry. And then for the second one, I said, no, take that definition that you put in your Sakai post and tell the image generator to give you an image of the American dream, but considering this as the definition, their personal definition. And so they got many more images that look like this. Can you go 2 ahead? Sorry, I feel like I'm bossing you. So this is the second one with their personal image, their personal definition. So as you can see now, we've got like immigration. You can see more like the faces. There's a bit more of a struggle. A lot more people of color. And so these were interesting just to see the difference, you know, from the first. And that just generated so much discussion. The students were like, look at mine. They were walking around. It was really an interesting win, I would say, you know, because students were talking and really interested in it. And then for homework, the third image, not everybody did it, but the third image was I told them to go home and play with it. Change it to however you want it to be, your representation of the American dream, which is the next one. This is what the students who did it came up with. So, I mean, I find it interesting that all of them, the ones who had some control over telling it, they all had a compilation of people, right? So there's lots of groups of people here together. So it looks kind of like quilt work, sort of. Okay, the next slide. Oh, is the clicker working?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Oh wait, I'm going back. Okay, so these are the wins. So the things that so aside from having it be a lot of fun, some surprising, you know, benefits or wins from this lesson were the reflections. I had them go back and on Sakai to reflect on each image, and then they had to stand up and tell us about it the next day. So they said things like, it was what I expected to see, however, it was still discouraging to have those suspicions confirmed. The images show the limitations of AI. So students on their own were coming up with these observations. And all the others generated with the prompt, American Dream, were white, majority male. The second image, this person said, after I added race to my definition of the American dream, the AI generator only drew black Americans. It did not seem to recognize that Americans could be more than just black or white. It was just fascinating to read, you know, what these students were getting from you know, working with the image generator. Let's see, I tried to get the AI to create a more diverse group of Americans. It reminded me of the light imagery in Richard Blanco's one today. So this was a great, and I'll get to this on the last slide in a few minutes. We start the class with the poem One Today that Richard Blanco read at the inauguration of Obama, I believe. And so they made this connection. You know, they're like, this reminds me of this poem. So there, I didn't even anticipate, I didn't even think that they were going to make connections to our class readings. I saw firsthand the racial and gender biases in AI. It helped me determine what I want and don't want to see. So you can see, I mean, when you have your students coming up with these sort of, you know, observations on their own, I felt like it was really effective. And I also like this. It helped me understand the impact of visualization, can clarify or manipulate our interpretations of a certain idea. And the last one for reflections. AI has a more negative outlook of the American dream. So, I don't know, I thought this was really, the image became much more positive and less concerned with money, but more concerned with bonding. So this was after the student put his definition in. I learned that, so AD is, American dream is different for every individual. So in the end, what I thought, and I say unexpected because I really just threw this together. Students recognize the flaws of AI. They also question the validity. They stressed the importance of human input. So this was not only in their observations on Sakai, but also just talking. They engaged in robust discussions and came up with thoughtful reflections. And this is the thing I really was very happy about. We had read The Case for Reparations by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and they were like, you know, how he's talking about redlining and home ownership, and look at all these images have a house in it, you know, and they were making this really fabulous connection between the American dream having to do with home ownership and how many groups of Americans have been basically, you know, redlined and prohibited from home ownership. So that was something I could not have predicted. And then also, we're also reading Poverty by America, and so they made all these connections to those images. So for me, that worked. And I'm going to try it again this semester. I predict, because I think AI is changing so rapidly, I predict that their first image will be different than it was a few months ago, just based on the AI generators and all the information it's getting. But I don't know. But so I'm going to try it again because I think it worked. But I'm open to other ideas because I don't know if you guys see anything here and it made you think of something else that I could add. So anyways, that's what I did. Any questions?
We can take 1 to 2 very quick follow-up questions, and then we're going to move on to Gizem, your presentation.
Did you try the assignment before you assigned it?
No. And I told them honestly, I mean, it's my first time teaching this. I've taught FWS for years, but a different, more of a linguistics focus, sociolinguistics focus class. So this is my first time teaching this one. And I told them, I said, some of this stuff, I was honest. I said, I want to try this out. And they were game. So no, I didn't. But.
I was interested in your early comment about not using any AI, which I assume includes spell check, right, for teaching writing. But I have a no typo rule, so I take grades off for typos. But I say you must use spell check.
Yeah.
And you not, I mean.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, anything that's on Word, like typing on Word, I mean, yeah, I definitely expect them to use the Word document spell check. So I'm talking about all the new text generating, like ChatGPT. Yeah, but no, certainly, I'm also that way about typos. Because I tell them it's just like sort of an indication that you're not proofreading if you have a typo. I mean, I'm pretty tough about that kind of stuff, but no, I would expect them to use, yeah. I'm just talking about, and one more thing, and then I believe this. If you don't have an AI policy, I'm 99% sure that your students are using it. I think that you should expect that they're running the prompts through, and even if they're using it as a beginner, I just have too many discussions with students one-on-one because of my other role, not just as teacher, but I work with them a lot. I just know they're all using it. So I think that's a case for having a policy. Anyways, but okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our second panelist is going to be Gizem Karaali, who's professor of mathematics and statistics at Pomona College.
Hi.
And the floor is yours, and this is Liz right here.
Yeah, the down is forward, the bottom one.
This one?
Oh, we'll do the other way.
Nope.
There we go.
For me, the bottom one, yeah.
Okay. So, for fun and profit, profit doesn't mean, well, I guess it means making money because we teach and that's how we earn money, right? So that's what it means here. I really think of this as ChatGPT, so I'll say a little bit about that. That's my personification, I guess, of ChatGPT. Because it's only 14 months old. The proper pronoun for it is it. That's what I asked and learned. But it is really well read. I think it has read a lot more than any of us in this room. But it has, as it always admits, no lived human experience. And so as a result, it also lacks common sense quite a lot. So you might find some ridiculous answers here and there. Oh, see what ChatGPT said, how silly, it's, who calls it artificial intelligence? It's really not intelligent and whatever. Think of it as a 14-month-old who has read a lot. That's how I think of it. Okay, so at this point, as a mathematician who teaches math, I care about whether or not it can do math, right? Though it can do some types of math at this point, and quite cheerfully it will say, oh, here is, of course I can do this for you, and sometimes it will make mistakes. So last January, 2023, I wrote this editorial about artificial intelligence and quantitative literacy, and it's on the way to becoming one of my most cited papers, which is really weird. But, so at that time, ChatGPT really did not know how to do math at all. It knew how to create word after word, really fluent sentences. So it could tell me how to solve a math problem, because it could read textbooks that told it how to do it, but it could not apply any of that knowledge. So for instance, I asked it to count, like how many different ways are there to sort of arrange the letters of the word probability. It knew how to do it, it knew the method, but it could not count how how many R's there were in probability. And so it could not do the math, right? So it could teach me how to do it, except it couldn't do it. But today, right, it has Wolfram plugin, which is Wolfram Alpha is out there, free resource. It can do all kinds of mathematics. So it calls in Wolfram. It says, oh, you're asking me a math question. I'll call Wolfram. And Wolfram does it for me, right? So it can do quite a lot with mathematics at this point, standard math problems. But we're also used to this because Wolfram Alpha was there already. So we know that students can get these answers. It can write and sometimes run Python code. Now it's somewhat limited, and I'll tell you a little bit what types of code it generates. It can write LaTeX code, which is the typesetting language that mathematicians and mathematical scientists usually use to typeset their papers and homework sets and lecture notes. And so it's pretty useful for mathy people. You can say, oh, it's the bros who created it anyway, so of course they will teach you how to do LaTeX. And maybe that's good. It's okay for me in that context. It can create lots of colorful visuals using DALL-E 3. In my images, I don't get white dominant. So maybe DALL-E is better than what you're looking at. I don't know. But so I think it is, of course, it has all kinds of different issues with it. I'll tell you a little bit more about them. But and now it can do real-time search because Microsoft and OpenAI are sort of really friendly, right, in various ways. And so it's pretty powerful in many ways. So this is a link, tiny URL, AI resources for instructors that Alicia and I have put together. Alicia is a PISA faculty member, and she and I are members of the CTL Generative AI Fellowship that was mentioned already by Keri, mentioned it already earlier. So we have put together some resources. It's sort of how to get started. There are a bunch of links to different faculties' policies and different websites where various higher education institutions have put together for their faculty. Then there's some information about how this thing works and so on. So you can take a look at it. Okay, so I find it very powerful. Okay, so as I said, I really liked this picture, so I gave it to him, gave it to it, and this said, now you can do math. So can you draw me a picture of you doing math? So that's what it did. Okay, so this is ChatGPT doing math. Okay. All right, so it's not a math genius. It can't do all math problems. So it's not even as smart as some humans. One of my colleagues, Gary Smith, from the econ department at Pomona, he's adamant that artificial intelligence is not intelligent, at least this version of it is not intelligent. He keeps writing essays and articles about how what kinds of issues he finds with these things. And some of the things he finds that ChatGPT and other large language models cannot solve, I am skeptical that someone you pull from the street can solve those problems. But yes, we know how to solve those problems. We as humanity have collected knowledge and heritage that some of us know how to solve these things. And maybe if you knew the problem well, you could solve it yourself. And yes, maybe ChatGPT can't do it. But medium style problems, I think it's still pretty good, I'd like to say. So, I mean, it's not as good as I said. And for instance, here, I asked it to create a poster that is, recreate a poster that's outside the door of one of my colleagues. It says, how to be a math person. 1, be a person. 2, do math. And I asked it to create this. Now, this was the best one. So it's really, at this point, pretty terrible at creating text-heavy imagery. So apparently this is what you, like those luggage weigh. So you need to be one of those things that weigh luggages and so on. So, but it still looks kind of nice, right? But yeah, it's not very, very smart. But I think it's still awesome in any way. I have spent a lot of time on this. I've enjoyed using it, and I'd recommend it strongly. Just start playing around with it and see what you get. So I'll talk to you about 3 things that I do. I'm a mathematician, but I teach also first-year writing seminars. So I think at least some of my examples will be applicable to many of you. This first one, you will have to have syllabi for your courses. So this is how I use ChatGPT, not my students, but I am revising one of my syllabi for this coming semester. It was a very last-minute syllabus that was put together many years ago. Today, I am a much more experienced instructor with a lot more opinions about how I should be doing things. So I thought it's about time to revise this. And I asked ChatGPT to help me with it. And I asked, can I upload a short course description? And you could convert the topics covered into learning objectives without using the verbs understand, learn, and explore. Make the learning objectives sure. That's where I started, right? So I entered in my PDF file, 2.5 pages, and then it just gave me some ideas. And then I went back and forth with it, asking questions. Well, I don't really think that's a good way to say it. Or I think maybe you should combine those two. And so we kept back and forth, going back and forth. So in some sense, maybe I'm talking to myself, right? But I'm talking to myself in a productive manner, right? Right, so it is, or you could say it's a nice assistant of some sort, right? So in the end, I have something that is my new Math 1, Math Philosophy and the Real World syllabus. I'm still tweaking it. My conversation with ChatGPT is done, I think, but I'm still tweaking it myself. So I'm quite pleased with what happened, and I still think this is my syllabus. I will put a note saying ChatGPT was used in the construction of this syllabus, but I will say that it is still my course. It is still my ideas. It is still it feels mine, right? So I should say that. Now, if you were to do something like this, I would suggest you should start with concrete requests, right? So for instance, I was saying, if I want to make my syllabus more welcoming, what kind of things would you recommend? It gives me bullet points. It loves bullet points. Now, some of those may not be applicable to your course. Some of those may be just like, we know that already. But there might be some things that are new, and there might be some things that you hadn't thought about. For instance, there was one which I had not thought about before, which tells me that I should have maybe, but feedback mechanism. Feedback about the syllabus. Feedback about and I asked my students throughout the semester some feedback, but I never had it in my syllabus. Now I will have it in my syllabus. So it's not going to do the work for you. Hopefully it won't, right? Because if you depend on it, you know that some of the things that you get will be like that, be a person, right? Right? So you don't want to let it do everything, but it can, I think, help you as a thoughtful, I'd say, or but maybe at least informed. It knows a lot. It has read a lot. Again, coming back to that, right? Those are my takeaways from here. So, okay. Now, the second thing is more mathy, perhaps, as an example, but the main idea behind this is mistakes are a part of learning. This is a fundamental sort of principle of learning theory. You learn by making mistakes. You learn by analyzing mistakes. You learn by trying to figure out what is wrong in what you have done. And so here is where I will talk about ChatGPT giving you Python code or other types of code. So I teach linear algebra. This past semester I was teaching it, and I was going to be talking about a process which starts with two vectors and makes them perpendicular to one another. It's called Gram-Schmidt orthogonalization. And so I asked ChatGPT, can you give me code that will give me an image that represents this process? Of course, cheerfully it gives me this thing again. Of course I can. Here's a code, and here's what it will output. The nice thing is it does output this image, which is wrong, and you can tell. Even if you're not mathematicians, you can tell. The end result should be two perpendicular vectors. Do you see? These two vectors should be perpendicular to one another. Perpendicular is right angle. right. And so I can see that's wrong. But it's running. Right? It gives me working code, and I could just tweak it around, and this is actually what I would want. Here's two vectors that are perpendicular, those starting with green v1, v2. I get them moving around, and so the code that it gave me was functional but wrong. But I tweak it, and you guys got something useful, right? So this was nice. So I could put that in my lecture notes. But I could also ask students, okay, here's what ChatGPT's code gave me. What's wrong with it, right? So if you think it's a valid visualization of this process, describe the process in 3 to 4 sentences. If you think it's not a valid visualization, explain what is wrong. So I think this was one of the funnest problems computational exercises this semester, people were, oh, really? That was interesting because they know that some students are avoiding ChatGPT like the plague because they are really scared and they're thinking, oh, AI will come and get my job. I will have no jobs in the future, so they don't want to think about it, learn about it. Some of them are infatuated with it. They know they think it can do everything. So this is sort of, yeah, it can do a lot, but not everything, right? And so, let's see. So again, I would suggest teach students to be AI critical by finding striking examples of where they fail, but also make sure to show where it excels. For me to come up with that first plot, it would have taken me, I don't know, at least 30 minutes to an hour. Just spat it out, I could run it, and then I could tweak it in 10 minutes and get what I wanted. And I'm not great at these things. Of course, an expert would have done it much faster, but I'm not an expert. Now I can do it with ChatGPT, right? So if I know a little bit more than what ChatGPT does, then I can do something good. So again, this is what I would like us to teach our students. ChatGPT is not or should not, is not going to or should not do all of the work for you, but you can use it as a informed or at least helpful, willing assistant. So those are my takeaways from this one. So now, as I said, I also teach first-year writing seminars, and this is a very short example I will share with you. In this year's installment of my first-year writing seminar, we read this short prose poem by Gloria Anzaldúa about why she writes. Note the way Anzaldúa intertwines identity, writing, and consciousness. So we read this, we discussed it, and we talked about it. Students were really taken. They opened up individual sentences and so on and so forth. And then I said, what if I told you it wasn't Anzaldúa who wrote it, but ChatGPT, our little friend ChatGPT, whom we asked to write something like this in the voice of Anzaldúa. There was a gasp, audible gasp in the classroom, and they were like, oh! right? So, and then that allowed us to start talking about authenticity. That allowed us to talk about originality, author voice, the role of the reader, right? The role of the audience in sort of interpretation, and it was a very productive conversation. So it is her work. It is not ChatGPT. No, ChatGPT can do quite well in mimicking other people's voices, again, because it has read so much more. Like, you might be an expert in Virginia Woolf, maybe then you have read more about Virginia Woolf. Unless you are. I'm sure it has read more about Virginia Woolf than you have. No, still, I mean, it's out there. I would suggest AI can write passable essays, accept this. Your students should accept this, but of course, hopefully we try to comfort them about their existential anxiety in relation to this. Oh, what am I doing here if AI can do everything I can do better? Well, that's not quite the situation. But if you don't want them to use AI, you might want to tell them why and when not to use it, okay? One of the things I say is, remember how you felt when I said that wasn't Anzaldúa? How you felt kind of cheated, right? So that's what I mean. I want to be reading your essays, right? And I want to be engaging with your human mind behind those words. I don't want to read something ChatGPT wrote for me, right? So that is kind of what I do tell them. It's not, again, it's like the persuasion that the previous presenter was talking about. It's not going to persuade everybody, but maybe it'll reach some people. But also, I do think that it raises questions about originality, intentionality, voice, audience, and those conversations and discussions belong in all our classrooms, especially first-year writing seminars. So I think these are all the takeaways that I have for you. Hopefully this was somewhat useful or interesting. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Question.
Yeah. Because,
Yes.
just to clarify, when you're using ChatGPT, have you upgraded to ChatGPT 4?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I was like, I don't think it can do math.
Well, actually, some beta people are getting Wolfram as well.
Okay.
It can do Wolfram, and when it calls
Even the
Wolfram,
version can do Wolfram?
that's what I've been told. I am doing 4, but I've been told that it still can do math. And one of my colleagues was saying, I gave it all my calculus problems. It can do all of them now.
Interesting.
Yeah. All of my final exam questions. That's what she was telling me. So, the director of the Chinese section, and he's at Pomona, and we're excited to hear your presentation.
Hi, everyone. So, thank you for coming to today's panel. So my presentation will be slightly different from previous two because I will talk about software or a website I developed for my course with my students during last semester. So so the title of my presentation is AI and Adaptive Learning. So because I believe that in front of disruptive technology, there are only two types of people. Slow adapters and quick adapters. I'm kind of like leaning towards the second category. So this is why I say AI and adaptive learning. So here, AI, so I want to clarify that means generative AI, because AI has been with us for many years. So tracing back to the origin, you will see like in the 1940s, we already have the original version of the AI. Say, in psychology, you have the kind of neural network modeling at the time. So, but again, we're talking about generative AI. So the history is pretty short. So all came from a paper published in 2017 titled Attention is All You Need. So the idea is that we created this kind of like transformer model to actually as a base of ChatGPT. And OpenAI actually adopted this model in 2018. Think about that, 2018 to 2022. Very short time period. So this is why I call this disruptive technology, because everybody is paying attention to it right now. So for my course, so last semester I taught a course called Digital News Reading Chinese. So I actually faced two challenges at the very beginning of the semester. So one is that, this is a fourth year level Chinese course, I cannot assume all the students actually have exactly the same proficiency, especially for reading. It's kind of a little hard. Second one is a no textbook. Let's say I want to repeat this course. It's very hard, right? So these are the two challenges I had last semester. But prior to my offering, so I actually work with 3 students, 2 Harvard Math students and 1 CMC students, to think about a project for their Spring 2023 Claremont Hackathon. So they would like to develop an application that can actually use AI. So that kind of like interest caught my attention. I told them that why not just develop something for my course. They ended up creating a very interesting website for me, and I used that in my course last semester. So what we did is try to use ChatGPT API. So API is Application Performance Index. Think about this. So for example, you have a let's say a desktop or laptop. So I use ChatGPT on the back end. So the idea is that every time when you actually use this website, you will not see ChatGPT. Just like other people, okay, I just open ChatGPT, then I will type something there. So, but for this application, so the interface is like this. So you will not see any sign of ChatGPT. But on the back end, we pipe in ChatGPT. So actually, you are using ChatGPT for it. So for this website, so there are 2 major functions I want to point it out here. One is like to paraphrase the article. So the idea is that I will use authentic articles in Chinese, but I will not assume all the students will understand authentic Chinese, especially for recent news, right? Vocab and very complex grammatical patterns. So the website will be the website is able to paraphrase the article for you if you don't understand it. Another one is to generate an article. For example, you're interested in AI, but you want to read something that actually uses a language that you can understand. So the second function, which is harder, which means like the reader has a kind of topic, and the ChatGPT has to kind of generate an article based on this reader's proficiency level. So here's a kind of like snapshot of how you can use it. So the idea is that, for example, in my class, I will assign recent news every week. Then students, what students can do is to paraphrase the news into this website. For example, this is a passage in Chinese, probably you don't understand, of course. Then there are 2 functions here. So one is too hard, and another one is too easy. So the idea is that for a lot of students, so they will say, this article is too hard because that article actually uses authentic Chinese. Then you press the too hard button. So on the back end, the ChatGPT will paraphrase that for you, right? But you can use it indefinitely, which means like Even ChatGPT paraphrases for you, and then you feel like, oh, still too hard. I can keep clicking too hard, until you feel, oh, this is okay for me to read. And another function is too easy. For some students, in some very rare cases, students feel, oh, this article is too easy for me. I want it to make it harder. Then you can, it's too easy. Then ChatGPT on the back end will paraphrase that, make it harder for you. Then this is a paraphrase text for you. So the idea is that you still have other functions. You don't have to use any online dictionaries or Google Translate. What you have to do is that, for example, I highlight this word. I don't understand this word, although I feel like this text is okay for me. But again, so there are still some unknown words. What you have to do is just highlight this word, then you get the translation here, and the word will be automatically added to a new word list. Because in my class, I don't use a textbook, right? And I also assume that students will have kind of like a different new word list, right? Because they have different proficiency levels and they have different interests in different topics. So this is the additional functions like attached to this website that you can use. So which means like every time when students come to my class, I assume that every student has a list of new words based on their proficiency level and based on their knowledge. And also they have some kind of like tests that are associated with the topic that I can talk about. So when they come to my class, so they can actually talk about this topic. So now I'll move on to the second function, so to generate an article. So the idea is that, for example, some students may be interested in a specific topic. What they can do is that they can actually specify a difficult level. For example, you can say HSK 1 or A1. So A1 is the lowest level, and you just type in the topic that you want to know, like ChatGPT, or in Chinese or in any other languages. So basically, the website actually can deal with multiple languages like German or Spanish or French, etc. Then you can also limit the length of the article that you want to read. For example, I would just want to read an article about like 500 words, then which is fine. Then you can click the generate an article button. So a few minutes later, later you will see an article based on your special needs. So the idea is that here you really see so-called individualized learning. So the GPT can actually help you in terms of improving your reading ability in a foreign language. Again, so this website, I just want to reiterate that this website is not designed for Chinese only. So it works for many different languages. But the second function does not work very well because ChatGPT has its limitation in terms of the database. So as you already know that ChatGPT has the largest data in English, not in other foreign languages. For example, you want to say like Russian, so most likely it will not work very well. And Chinese, which is, I think is fine, but again, so English actually works the best if you want to use the website. We're still fixing some issues. For example, there's a very long waiting time because we're using ChatGPT 3.5. And 48 hours ago, ChatGPT, OpenAI just launched the OpenAI store. So now you have the, we call it GPT team. So so you can subscribe for that and get better service from OpenAI. So based on my experience of teaching that course and using the website, I find that there are at least two advantages for using AI in this course. One is to address individual differences. Because in my class, I don't have the textbook, and I assume that students will have different proficiency levels. That works very well for me. And the second one is that ChatGPT can give you instant and individualized feedback, especially after class. Because a lot of students may have so-called foreign language anxiety. They don't talk too much in class, and they will just prefer to use some actually AI to help them after class. I think that works very well for students who have like learning challenges in the class. Tips of using AI. So I have like three kind of like tips for people who want to use AI in your class. One is to make it available to every student, because not everyone or every student in your class actually knows ChatGPT or any other generative AI. So if you want to use it, make it available to every student. The second one is that you have to customize it for specific purposes. It's generative AI. People are talking about like hallucinations, and ChatGPT will make this tons of mistakes. But again, I feel like this is totally fine because ChatGPT is developing at a very fast speed. What you have to do is to specify your kind of objectives. For example, if you want AI to help you to design a syllabus, then you have to give GPT some specific purposes. Last one is kind of like little painful for me because troubleshooting technological issues, because ChatGPT is still developing. Sometimes it doesn't work very well. For example, last night I was trying to use GPT and it was down just for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah. So, and students also reported this kind of issue to me because the website actually uses the service from ChatGPT. But the only solution is to kind of like pay for a service and get a better service that will help you out. Cheating, another issue. So I already said that. So in my syllabus, I included kind of this language in my syllabus, dividing using it to 2 categories: exploring ideas. Everybody is using that, and another one is cheating. So the cheating, the fine line is, I already say that. Whether the student can reproduce information or not. If the student cannot reproduce the information, I will consider that as cheating. Whereas I think that would be fine to use AI. And in fact, in my class, I encourage my students to use AI. If they say that, oh, actually I used AI for my essay, I ask the student to upload the original essay also. So in that way, I can see, okay, how much you have used AI, instead of just saying, okay, I'm using AI, right? So I think I can share that with everyone after this.
This will be posted.
Oh yeah. So this is my last slide. So what's the future? So I pick up this image. So because for me, I think the future there is something that is inevitable. That is human and computer interaction. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. But again, in the future, everyone has to kind of like encounter a bot. In one way or another. So I want to just quote William Gibson. So the future has already actually arrived. It's just not evenly distributed yet. Mm-hmm. The whole idea is that if we are not not adaptive to this new technology, eventually we will be forced to be adaptive. And I think for future courses, what we have to think about most is about take-home assignments, whether you can have take-home assignments or not, especially written assignments. We will encounter a lot of issues, not just for like math or CS 101 and other courses, and even for language courses, we have to face these kind of challenges. And it's always better to be ahead of the game compared to our students and make sure that we can have this kind of an edge in teaching a course. Otherwise, I think there's no reason for students to come to a college anymore. Okay, thank you.
For the sake of time, we're going to move right in and have our last presenter, Joseph Osborne, who's a member of Pomona College's computer science.
Hi.
I'm sorry.
I might strike a little bit of a different tone. So I'm a computer science faculty member. I'm actually also an AI researcher. I don't work directly in the area of large language models, but I do teach an AI elective from time to time. I introduced my AI course by saying AI doesn't exist. It's a nonsensical term because intelligence is just really slippery and has a lot of definitions, all of them bad. Moreover, I think AI is impossible in the way that it's typically presented in science fiction or by venture capitalists. I think that I can expand on that if people are curious. But I also think even if it were possible, it would be deeply unethical to create it. I think that it's rooted in the fantasy of the worker who will never rest, or the person who can't say no. And I think it's fundamentally problematic to produce thinking machines. Today the topic isn't AI in general, right? Today I think that everybody's really focused in on these large language models and image generators. I think you can make a really strong argument against using these or teaching these based just on the extreme secrecy under which they're developed, the extreme protections that companies go to hide their training set and training data, and the extreme centralization of power produced in companies like ChatGPT, for-profit companies, despite their weird organization, and the sort of laundering of power through to Microsoft, through to Google, through to these like companies that have the big data centers that can actually run these models. I think I won't expand too much on that either. I think that's just like a philosophical question you need to ask yourself. Instead, I'm going to complain about two other different things. First, I think there's a fatal category error at the heart of the way ChatGPT presents itself to users. And second, I think there's an essential problem because these large language models are like plausibility machines or plausible text generators that make them only suited for really particular purposes and not as general tools. So I'm not an alarmist. Like I'm not worried about super intelligence. I do think military use of killer robots is inevitable, unfortunately. But I'm really skeptical about large language models. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how these things work. I mean, it's very high level. You don't need any linear algebra to engage in. Today's large language models work by reproducing some human phenomenon, some observable output, right? They're very concerned with outputs. They don't or shouldn't make a claim that they are working in a way similar to how people do those things. I don't think anybody is seriously claiming this. A claim like that would be suspect anyway, because we don't really have a deep enough understanding of these cognitive processes to be able to put them into a machine. We can be inspired by them, but we can't reproduce them because we don't understand them. So these models are developed by comparing their actual outputs to their expected outputs for some given input. That's it. This is not typically how human writers are trained. They're not typically trained to reproduce input texts, right? Or to create the correct essay for some given inputs. These kinds of models are meant to fill in plausible text based on preceding text. That's it. It turns out that this is really useful, right? It turns out you can apply this to a large number of problems, and many things that we find valuable have been written or have been close enough to been written before that this plausibility generator can produce what we want. But that's what it's doing. It's giving you what you ask for. Just as a quick aside, a really shallow argument against the human likeness of these systems. They're typically implemented, all the ones that are in use now, are implemented using these things called artificial neural networks. Maybe people have heard of it. Sometimes it's shortened to neural network. And you'll often see diagrams of these as cleanly organized layers of little neurons, or neurodes, as people in the 70s and 80s wrote about them to distinguish them from neurons, where you have some inputs going into your system, and every input is going to all these different little mathematical functions. Each one is computing some value, passing them on to the next layer, everything to everything, all to all, combining all of this data, and eventually collapsing into a prediction or some number of predictions, right? We have terminology to describe this. We say that the structure is built into layers, and layers have activation functions that map the input somehow. That's all I'll say about it. Because if you have taken biology class, if you have taken anything in neuro, This is not representative in any way, shape, or form of human brains, or animal brains, or even like plants, right? Like, there aren't these clean divisions, there aren't really like even input-output relations exactly. Neurons in the brain are really like densely tangled up and connected to many, many others. It's a big mess. The sort of original sin of AI research is we get really excited about some intentional language. Like machine learning in this case, it's learning, it learns stuff. Or neural network, it's like, it's a brain. It's like a brain, it's inspired by a brain. We're really challenged by confusing the map for the territory, by thinking our model is in fact the thing being modeled. Technologists, even AI researchers, fall into this trap all the time. In the 70s, it was planning. Because we thought, hey, something that intelligent creatures do is formulate a series of steps to complete an action, right? We think ahead, we hypothesize like what things will be like along the way to achieving our plan, and then we execute those actions. And here's where the problem arises. If you really think about it, maybe everything we do is just formulating a sequence of steps and then doing those steps. Like when I put my jacket on, maybe I'm thinking, I'm going to like first pick it up, and then I'm going to put my left arm in, and then I'm going to reach around because I know it'll be in this place and I'll pull it. But this is not, we're much more reactive than that. I don't think that we really produce a plan like that. And maybe we do things unaware of them. You might drive home and just realize that you forgot the last 20 minutes of what happened, right? But if you ask an AI researcher in the 1970s or 1980s, yeah, of course, like planning can do anything a person can do, because everything a person can do is just planning. There's this big impulse, not only to anthropomorphize machines, but to like computerize people. This is a general historical trend, right? And today we're seeing it in large language models. That because they're really, something that people can do is answer questions, right? ChatGPT is presented as a question answering conversationalist. And so the way it's being presented makes it very easy to imagine you're having a conversation with a person, when in fact it's filling in likely text, which is, as far as I know, not a cognitive model of human conversation that we're, except in maybe very unusual cases, people are not telling you the thing that they predict that you are asking for most likely all the time, right? So it's not like a technical move, really. It's not a technological advancement to be saying that this machine is thinking, it's learning, it's planning, it's answering your questions. It's a marketing move, right? It's a human-computer interaction move, is a more generous way to say it, right? It makes it easier to engage with the system. Or it's an aspirational move. And I think it's the parties that are offering these products are not capable of giving that critical perspective on their own work because they're marketing a product. And I think it's one thing that we can do as educators is to help students understand, and our peers understand, that just because answering questions is something that a mind can do, and this is a system that is answering questions, doesn't mean that it is a mind, right? One particular thing that I think is very important for students and people to remember is these systems don't exist in between their invocations. So in between one call to ChatGPT and another, it isn't continuing, there's no process that's happening. There's no belief revision, there's no change in it. It's static. It only changes insofar as your prompt. That's the end of my soapbox time. I think there's a whole conversation about counterfeit humans, as Daniel Dennett calls them, and ways that we can try to push for legislation or whatever to manage these things. but I'll just close with the, so to me that's the category error part. I don't have any time, but the essential problem with them is, I'm going to explain with an anecdote. So there's a language model called Copilot that's used for programming. It's used to support computer programmers. It's advertised in part to make novice programmers more productive, right? It has this huge body of source code. Many problems that you're writing code for have been solved already by somebody else. It maybe boosts novices to work more productively earlier in their career. That sounds like a marketing claim to me. I don't know if it's true or false. But I do know that it requires expertise to read code, just as it does to write code. I think you'll see this in creative writing as well, right? Or any kind of writing task. It's through the process of writing that we develop our thoughts, right? It's through the process of programming that we understand what it is that we're even trying to do. So I know in my own experience trying to use Copilot, even where a suggestion is relevant to what I'm trying to do, I need to spend a lot of time reviewing it. I have difficulty trusting it. It's often wrong or needs to be changed in various ways. And I think it's a bit of a trap for novices who are least able to evaluate the outputs of these systems to be so readily generating tons of output, right? Before they're able to really appraise it. I think that there are definitely interesting cases. I love Gizem's example of the faulty visualization, and I think there are definitely situations where it's valuable to produce a lot of suspect code, right, or suspect writing. But I think that it really confuses the goal of programming, the goal of writing, which is not to produce text, right? It's not necessarily to produce a program. Like the purpose is, at least in our context for sure, to learn something. And it's a lot. If we're producing stuff where only the output matters and the input is the process of us doing it doesn't matter, then that's a problem. Like that's the actual problem is that we're asking for busy work to happen. To me, that's the thing we should focus on. And this technological approach of using ChatGPT to solve it for us is I don't know. It's solving the wrong part of the problem. That's. Thank you for attending.
Thank you so much for running late. So sadly, we cannot take any time for more official Q&A, but if you want to stay for an extra 5 to 10 minutes here and ask questions, especially to Feng and Joseph, who didn't get to be asked any questions, please feel free to stay in this room. We also wanted to share, so Gizem shared a link to resources that they're creating. There's also resources on the CTL website, which you can see. Well, I had a slide prepared, and it's not there anymore. No, it's not there. It is here. And you can see it. We have a little QR code that you can scan right there. And also on your worksheet, there's post-reflection images that you can use to reflect on what you just learned and reflect on how you could apply some of the activities you heard about, from your colleagues. Please let us thank everyone for their amazing presentations. I want to take a class with all 4 of you. It was incredible, and I wish it was longer. Thank you so much for attending, and please feel free to stay for more questions and discussions on the subject. Thank you.